Okay, so now we're going to review classic tactics for controlling people, and you should all be familiar with most of these. One we talked about briefly, which was do not set clear objectives, and one of the real reasons actually is that your true objective is hidden. A lot of times it's a personal thing. For example, you want to get personal control over a certain market that's not necessarily good for the company, but is good for your career, for example. And so another one is that you really want to focus what's on management's radar screen. So let other people worry about servicing customers and doing what really is required to have the company run, and really focus on the crisis of the day, because you're going to get a lot more credibility and a lot more notice that way. Also, remember, it's a lot easier to look good than to be good, or to do something that makes sense. And always find a scapegoat. Management is always looking for something sexy that they can flash in front of the board of directors, for example. So a very, very good tactic is to stay on the strategy side, really focus on the dream, sell the dream to management and the excitement, and find some poor rabid mutt to actually implement it. And if something goes wrong, you can blame it on him or her. And usually the mutt is not aware of what's happening. Also, remember simplicity over accuracy, because that's what really sells at the management level, especially at the board level. The board is not interested in details. So in terms of sales, sell what's good for that individual personally. Don't sell them on what's right for the company they work for. Sell them on how they can get more power, they can get more recognition, they can get commissions. And remember, compensation drives behavior. We have an interesting story about a company we invested in which helped to optimize cell site towers when they were deploying the GSM networks. And they reduced the number of cell sites. But it turns out that the groups that were deploying the cell towers were being compensated on something completely inconsistent with that. We didn't know this at the time. They were being compensated on the speed at which they could deploy cell towers and the cost per cell tower. It didn't matter how many cell towers there were, even if it would save them money. So of course, nobody's going to come out and tell you that. So the idea is you need to find intelligent information to get on the inside to find out how are they being compensated, because the company's strategy is totally irrelevant. All that really matters is how they're being compensated. So some classic tactics: bait and switch, make promises, and then try to switch to your real agenda. Good cop, bad cop, string people along, try to get information from people by promising sales. Engineers, again, don't put them in management, but they're really, really great at giving you information because they tend to be very, very honest, even in competing companies. Always give your employees development objectives. If you ever need to fire somebody, humiliate them, or control them, if you have development objectives on record, and human resources loves to collect this kind of information, then you have at any opportunity you can fire them or use tactics, pressure tactics, to get them to do what you want. You also want to be able to use third parties to get credibility. For example, management consulting firms are very, very good at rubber stamping programs. And if there's any problem with that program, you can always blame it on them. It's a very, very effective tactic. Catch people's weaknesses. Most people need to save face. And sometimes it's very practical politically, but often people need to save face for ego reasons, and you can smell that. You can smell that fear. So you can often use that against them because they're disarmed and they're acting irrationally. Find something they love and bond with them. This is a pretty common one. If they like Rolex watches, bring in a Rolex watch. Borrow one if you have to. Buy one and then return it. After that, they're not going to question what you're trying to do. They're going to think you're one of them. And also remember this: people tend to underestimate their own abilities and overestimate other people's abilities. So again, you can control people because they're wondering, am I good enough? Am I good enough? And always remember that. You can use that element of doubt to control them. It's also very effective to create frustrations. This is another very, very common tactic. A lot of lip service, a lot of lip service. For example, we care about our customers. We're really focused on trying to improve this customer service, and then don't do it. So it's very common for, especially you see this in a political environment where our politicians promise they're going to do something and then they don't do it. And what happens is you create a lot of frustration. It's very effective at disarming people because they get to the point where they think, maybe it's me, or maybe they figure the whole system's hopeless. And so they don't bother after a while of constant lip service. They just give up. And of course, every opportunity you can to inject shame, guilt, or disdain, definitely do that. Another effective tactic that's very, very common is what we call transposition. And let me give you an example of transposition. Let's say that I say to you, you say to me that let's go get some Indian food for lunch, but I don't want Indian food. I can say to you, wouldn't you rather have Chinese? You see what I'm doing here is I'm elevating myself above you, and I'm making my problem your problem. And so I achieve two things. One is I get the Chinese food that I want, and I make you feel like it's your fault. It's very good at constantly reinforcing that, again, to drive people to the level where you can easily control them. And then one final point in the tactics is reorganization. Why do people reorganize? Well, the reasons for reorganization is, one is you want to grab more power. You want to show progress. Sometimes when you're in a situation where you don't really know what to do, just reorganize. It looks at the board of directors level that you're showing progress, and again, they're going to buy into it, and if the reorganization fails, since they bought into it, they're not going to complain. Eliminate threats. The idea is you don't want any one person getting too powerful, so when you reorganize, you limit their skill sets in any one area, so they're much more dispensable. Moving jobs overseas to reduce costs is very important sometimes. And these are all very effective tactics that we use, and usually most of these come very naturally.